to part 5 of the Quarantine CAL. Can you believe we're at part 5 already? And this is actually our last block, which is this longer rectangular block. And this I call the TV tester stripe. And so it's worked in 2 parts. We start off with this multicoloured stripe section. It's worked with 7 colours, but if you don't have so many in your stash, you can just alternate either colour different ways. And then we're working these in treble stripes, and that's part 1. And then we're going to go on to part 2, and we're doing stripes, which I've done monochrome for a nice like harsh contrast. And then it's working double crochet and treble stripes, and we're using live stitches. So this motif is really building on what we've learned so far. We're going to learn how to change colours and recap our live stitches. So grab your yarns, grab your hooks, I'm going to flip you around and let's start. For part 1 we're going to be making our colour block stripe, and you see I've got 7 colours here at the top. You might just want to use 2 colours and alternate them. But I'm going to start with my first colour, put it on my hook, and we're working in rows for this piece. So we want to do our foundation chain, and we want to chain 16. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And these last 3 stitches on your hook are your turning chain. So we're going to start with row 1 and we're going to count back, and we're going to want to do 1 treble in the 4th stitch. So don't count the one on your hook. 1, 2, 3. That's our 4th stitch. We're going to do our treble into that chain. And now we're going to want to treble across the row into each stitch. And just make sure with your foundation chain that it's not been too tight, so try and do that first chain very loosely, or in fact you might want to use a hook size up to do that first chain. We're going to go into every stitch all the way across. When you get to the end, you just want to check. We should have done 13 new trebles, and that first chain counted as 1, so we've got 14 stitches across. So just double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Perfect. Now we're ready to turn our work and go up to the next row. So you're going to want to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then treble back across into every stitch. Just make sure when you're going back across in rows, remember like when we were doing rows in part 2, that you want to go down into that first stitch so we don't lose one, and work our way across. If you find that when you're chaining up, this stitch is incredibly baggy, it might be because you actually have quite loose tension, and then instead of chaining up 3 at the start, you might want to chain up only 2 to give you the right height for how long your trebles are. So we're going to work across this entire row. And when you get to the end, just make sure, like if you're new to crochet, working in rows can be a little bit tricky by accidentally adding stitches. So just make sure you only go into that last stitch here and not into the next one, which is just part of your turning chain. And you'll see that when you crochet, it's not directly straight up the sides, it will wiggle a little bit, but don't worry about that, it will straighten off. So if you're new, just check on this second row that you've still got 14 stitches, turn your work, and you're going to want to repeat that 2 more times so we have 4 rows in that colour. When you get to your last stitch of that colour, you want to leave yourself a nice end. We can snip that off nice and long and leave that piece. We're now going to grab our next colour and we're going to join in. So take your next yarn, and the easiest way I find to join in is give yourself, I'm going to turn our work to get in the right direction, give yourself a nice end about the same length in your next colour, pinch your colour in and just do 1 chain like a slip stitch, and I then pull those tight, and I don't count that as anything, and I find this the easiest way to change colour. And if we just hold this firm for the first stitch, it will hold. Or another trick I've got is if you wrap that over the top and then we do our next chain of 3 up, it just pinches it in place and it won't run. So we're now going to work 4 rows across, 1 treble into each stitch in our second colour. So remember, we want 4 rows, so each colour block is in 4 rows, and then we're going to go on to our next colour. So we're at the end of our second block. We take our tail, leave a nice long about 15 centimetres cut, switch in for our third colour, and you're going to want to repeat that with all 7 colours. So I'll just go over the join again. Remember, turn our work to start, leave a nice long tail, pinch in at your stitch, pull through in a slip stitch, pull tight, take those ends, wrap them round your hook, and then do your chain up to secure them in place. And we're going to do that for all of our 7 colours, 4 rows each. So now you've finished off all 7 stripes. With that last stitch, we're just going to do an extra chain and finish it off. And that's part 1 of this block. And what you can also just check to see if our tension is good is if you grab your block 1, your edge of your piece should be the same size as the edge of your granny square. And so that's part 1. We're now going to work into the side to do part 2. For part 2 of the block, I'm going to be working in black and white for a nice contrast with our colour stripe. And we're going to be now working this way along the piece. And I'm also going to be working again with live stitches for my rows, like our live stitches in block 2. So I'm going to start off with my black, and we're going to start off by double crocheting along this row. So if we take our black, put it on our hook, and then we're going to join in, and I've just turned my block round so my loose ends are on the bottom and they're not going to get in the way, and I'm going to join in up here where I started my foundation chain, and I'm going to work into that first stitch, and I'm going to do a double crochet join. To then evenly add my double crochets along the row, I'm going to go from that stitch over this treble post, and then 1 double crochet into the top of that treble stitch, and then I'm going to go over the treble post and then into that treble stitch. over the treble post into that treble stitch and evenly make my way across the whole of that edge, and just repeating that. So over the treble post, into the stitch, over the treble post. If you feel that going over the treble post makes it too gappy, you can always stab through half of your treble, but I find this the easiest way to work across. So we're going to work all the way across. And when you get to the end, you're going to do one in the final top of that treble, and we're going to leave this end live. So pull your loop longer, and that's your first row in double crochet in your black or whatever colour you're using along the top. And you know that you've done it right if it sits like this. It should evenly sit flat. We're then going to grab our next colour, and I'm using white for the contrast, and I'm going to start with it on my hook, and I'm going to join in on the right side where we started before. So join in to the top of that double crochet, and we're going to be working our white in trebles. So I'm going to now chain up 3, and I'm going to treble down. And when we're starting this first row, I'm just going to treble into that next stitch along and work our way down the row. Towards the end of your row, you want to go in that last stitch, and then we're going to seal off the last live stitch. So you go through the stitch, put the loop on your hook, pull so it's tighter, take your treble, pull through both parts of that loop. Sometimes it gets a bit stuck, so you can just pull it over with your fingers. Finish off your treble and then pull that first row tight to seal off. And we're now going to work our third row of part 2, and it's going to be our black double crochet. So our black is this end, and we've just sealed it off. I'm going to take it and I'm loosely going to travel it up and pull it through with a slip stitch. I can pull my white tight to firm that up, but you don't want to pull your black too tight because you want it to travel up and not pull the work. I'm now going to turn around to work across the row. I'm going to do my chain up because I'm doing double crochet and need my height. And now I'm going to double crochet with my black into each top of stitch of the whole row. So work your way back across. We're going to get to that last stitch, and on the way back, so we don't lose a stitch, just remember on that sort of next double crochet row to go in, feels like an extra one, to the third chain of that first white row. Do our stitch. We're going to leave that live, pull our tail, and then we need to go to the edge which our white is at. So we're ready to carry this up. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our hook, we're going to put it through that first double crochet, hold our white, lift that up, pull that through, and then we're going to chain our 3 up and treble across the row. So you want to go in the next stitch and treble across. And you want to repeat that. So we end up having 5 white rows, and we're going to end on a treble row. So you want to repeat that sort of repeat, so you have 5 white rows. So when we've got to the point that we've got 5 white rows of trebles with our double crochet rows of black in between, and we're ending on a white, you want to take your scissors, you can chop your black, chop your white, do your 1 extra stitch to secure, and that finishes off our motif, which is the television tester stripe. And just remember, when we're doing this second part here, it's a little bit different from carrying up from this first part, and how in our white row, where we've got our 3 chain at the end, if we're ending a double crochet row, we want to just make sure that you double crochet into that final 3rd stitch. And the reason this is different is because we've got live stitches, and also because we're working in 2 colours, we just want to make the start of our rows like nice and straight. So that's why we don't go twice into that stitch like we were doing on this part. And that finishes your motif. So well done! You've now finished your 5th motif and our last part before we start finishing off and edging and joining. So if you're making the cushion, you're just going to want 1 of these. If you're making the blanket, you're going to want 4, and that's in your tighter tension. And if you're doing the jumper in the slightly looser tension, you're going to want to have 2 of these. And just before I finish up, we're just going to double check that they're going to fit nicely within our piece. So if you grab your square and your part 1, you just want to make sure, we're just going to double check again that that fits lengthways, and that is the same length. And if we're going to block our pieces, you want that to match. And then you want to grab one of your smaller motifs and just make sure that that lines up and fits widthways. And then we know that it's all going to line up together. And that's our last motif. So next week, what we're going to learn is how to sew our ends in properly, and also how to give all our motifs a double crochet edge border ready to then put our pieces together. So I hope you enjoyed that last square. Good luck with your crocheting this week, and I'll see you next week. Bye guys!